the best neck light for knitting. Hi everyone, Norman here. Today I want to review popular neck lights to find out which one is the best and which one is really not worth your money. So if you've ever knitted with black or very dark yarn, you probably know how vital these gadgets can be. However, some of them are actually not bright enough, others have batteries that only last a couple of minutes, and some just feel plain uncomfortable, are very heavy, or don't work if you have very big busts. So, let's find out which of these necklines is the best. Okay, so I tested things meticulously over 3 days, and this neck light by a brand called Grittin is the overall best neck light I could find during my review. So it's reasonably bright, and what I really like that on the brightest setting, the light was still pleasantly warm without being, yellow or bluish. Then it feels rather comfortable around my neck and has a wide padding here on the back. And then these arms here are highly adjustable, but they actually stay put. And then it only weighs 128 grams, and the batteries, they lasted 7.5 hours on the highest setting, and that was quite a bit longer than most of its competitors that only lasted 6 or 6.5 hours. So you will find the link in the description below, but hold your horses, because let's see how I actually got there. Because if you want to find the best neck light for you, this is going to be very important, as you will shortly notice. So here's what I did. I basically went to Amazon and bought the 10 most popular neck lights. I ignored all the emails offering to send me samples in return for a review, because typically only the fishy vendors do that, and as a consumer I would typically lean towards, if there is a sponsored review out there, that is typically your first sign to stay away from that product, and then that it's either crap or overpriced. With that out of the way, a good neck light should be lightweighted, comfortable, bright, flexible, reasonably durable, with a battery that lasts a couple of hours. So let's talk about these stats one by one, and then we can compare. First of all, here's all the neck lights I bought. So there's a brand called Glockusent, Luxjet, Grittin, Osram, Adoric, Stier, Esret, Cut, Eco, Faibui, YK Set, and Debonure. You will find all the names in the description below and over on my blog. Just getting this out of the way so you know what we're talking about. So, the whole point about a neck light is that you have a mobile light source, so you don't have to turn your whole living room into one big tanning studio. So here's what I did. I used a special light meter to record the brightness of each neck light at a distance of around 30 centimeters or around about 12 inches. So why 30 centimeters? Well, that seemed a reasonable average distance between your knitting. So imagine you have knit a blanket in your lap and you have your neck lights around your neck. So that seemed a reasonable average distance between the light and the knitting. For some it will be more, for some it will be less, but in either way, if it's always the same, I can still find out which one is the brightest and which one is very dim. Okay, so by far the brightest, with a very huge margin, was this Osram neck light here. So let's turn this out again. On my light meter I recorded 5,800 lux per light. So this here is sold by a brand called Esret or something like that, or Cut, C-A-T here in US. In Europe it's typically Osram, but it's, as far as I can tell, the exact same light. By comparison, so the next competitor, which was this neck light here by a company called Stier, this one here only recorded 2,800 lux per light. And the third most intense necklight was this one here by a company called LuxJet, and it had only 600 lux per light. And the worst necklight here in my test was this light here, very flimsy, by a brand called Eco, and it only had 110 lux per light. Now it has to be noted that this lamp here by a brand called Bui, so that's the brand that sells this in Europe. In America, this actually doesn't even have a brand, but you can find it on Amazon. And it's very interesting because it has two different lights. So this wide light here during my test only recorded around 280 to 300 lux, but actually has quite a couple of LEDs in there. And then this necklight here on this light here on the other side is a very, very intense spotlight, and I recorded 2,500 lux on this side. So you kind of have a best of both worlds. If you want to see the full table, again, click on the first link in the description. It will lead you to my blog. So to put this into perspective, full bright daylight would be between 10 and 25,000 lux. It's winter now, and a very overcast, gloomy winter day, that would be around 1,000 lux. And office lighting is typically around 300 to 500 lux. So if you go by sheer brightness, only this Osram light, this steel light, and this, Bui light here would be worth your money. The rest is barely brighter than an average family room light. So if you go to Amazon.com, there's a very popular necklight with thousands of reviews here, Glocucent. And this here only registered 280 lux per light, which again is rather on the lower end of office lighting, more like, any light in your living room. Now it's important to understand that all of these necklights, they have little LED chips lights in there. Possibly even the very same LED lights, because there are only a handful of manufacturers, actually just two big ones. So what differs is the amount of LEDs they have in there, the power supply, and the lens that sits on top of it. So I also tested this out using a very similar test. So I placed the neck light 30 centimeters above ground, and then just checked how wide is the radius of the resulting light cone. And again, this Osram light here, it has some serious power behind each LED, so you can actually detach this, and all this here is one power bar. So it's very, very intense, and as a result, it creates a very, very lovely cone where there are absolutely no shadows left. This lamp here also deserves to be mentioned, because here, this bright light here has a lens, a very focused lens. So it creates a kind of spotlight with a radius of 5-6 centimeters. While the other end here, this end here only had 300 lux, but it created a very, very wide cone of warm light in a radius of 25 to 25 centimeters or 10 inches or so. So that was also quite nice. During my tests, I found that most of the lights that had this little flat diffuser thing in front, rather than, a light bulb thing here, they had the more pleasant and uniform light cone. And, and on the other end of the spectrum, you had the aforementioned LuxJet light. This is sold by a different brand in the US. And according to my test, it had 600 lux in the dead center, which sounds like a lot. But the lens here, this bulb-shaped lens, is very, very weird. So there's a very, very sharp cone with radius of 4 or 5 centimeters where it's very bright, and on the outside the light is very, very diffuse. So when using this neck light, I constantly felt like half of my project is in shadows, and because you are actually moving your project but this part here doesn't move, that actually became a problem. And then on the very far end of the spectrum, we had lights like this one here, this eco light here, that only had 1 out of 10 lux. And you know, on paper, it might shed light in a radius of 25 centimeters, which is ample and, you know, just as much as you need for knitting. But because the light intensity is so low, that light cone felt almost useless. So the light cone only works in concert with the light intensity, and if the overall light intensity is very low, it doesn't really matter what kind of lens they have here on top of the light. Now, most of these lights will have different modes on top of that. So some have 3 modes, some have only 2 brightness settings, but depending on your eyes and the yarn you are working with and the kind of conditions, like is there still sunlight or is it totally dark, you might want to have a light that is maybe brighter or not as bright, warmer or cooler. And in this regard, this Glockcrescent light stood out the most because it has 3 settings. So there is this warm yellow light, then there is this mixed light, and then there is this cool light. And on top of that, you can also adjust the brightness. So this has 6 settings, and this makes it very, very nice for those people who really need a lot of, options. Personally speaking, I actually like, despite these 6 modes, I actually liked this gratin light here a little bit more for knitting. So you cannot adjust the brightness, you can only switch between these 3 modes. However, I personally felt that this mixed light here had a very, very pleasant tone, because some of these lights, they offer 3 modes, but the yellow and mixed light, they are still, everything is a little bit too yellow, and because knitting yarn is often, this might be very nice for reading, but knitting yarn is typically, it already has a kind of warm color. So if you have a light that is too yellow, everything kind of blurs together. So I found this light here, the mixed setting was actually quite pleasant. And the same here for this light here. Here for this light also, I thought that the mixed light here has a very, very pleasant warm tone. On the far end of the spectrum, you had this Lux light, because this only has cold light, and the cold light is very, you can also tell this probably on camera, it was very, very bluish, possibly because there is some light leakage here through the blue ends, but I felt that was rather unpleasant. And here, these lights here, like this Osram light, it only has 2 settings, so it only has bright and not as bright, but there is no warm tone to it. So that is possibly for all those who enjoy warmer tones, neck lights like these. So these are typically sold as work lights or so, and not as knitting neck lights or so. These typically only have 2 settings, and they are very bright and not very warm. Oh, and I do need to mention that this Glockcrescent neck light is the only one where you can only, it has 6 modes, but you can only switch on both lights at the same time. All other neck lights allow you to manipulate the different ends separately. Now, personally speaking, I'm not really sure there is any use case in knitting, but I just felt like mentioning this regardless. And actually, I would go as far as saying, and a recent poll here on my channel seems to confirm this and support this, most people actually don't really need these modes. You either prefer warm light or cool light, and then typically you use it on the brightest setting. So if you're shopping for a neck light, just look at the description and pick whatever you seem to prefer, because typically these neck lights have like two, and you can see this here with this light, they have two LEDs, and one is blue or cool light, one has warm light, and if you switch on both at the same time, you get a mix. That's basically what they do. Now, yellow light, most people actually don't like that, because as I said, it kind of blurs everything together. Warm light is a different thing. Yellow light typically is better like for reading, things like that. So you can use this neck light for more than just knitting. So if that is what you are looking for, yellow light might be something you could be interested, but for most other knitters, cool light, or that's the vast majority, or warm light is what they are looking for, and not necessarily a yellow tone. Now, brightness is not all that matters. The weight of the whole contraption also is very important, and I asked these questions on my Patreon account, and I'm shooting this video about neck lights. Do you have any questions? And they said, well, weight, some of them feel too heavy. When we knit, we typically don't knit with a straight neck, the way your mom said you should sit at a dinner table. We typically bend our necks down. This means the spinal discs are already experiencing more stress. That's a normal leverage effect. So that's why even a small little extra weight matters a lot. And by far the lightest in this range was this luxury light with only 105 grams, and this eco light was a close second with 106 grams. So before I complained, well, they are not bright enough, they're very flimsy, but of course they are also very light. The heaviest light was this steer light with 155 grams, and then you have like this lamp here, which was 165 grams, also very heavy. The Glocucent light here, this was ranked 4th with 127 grams. So most of them are not totally heavy, but of course 50 grams, as I said, because of the leverage effect, 50 grams can actually feel more like 100, and that is something you will notice. Maybe not after 5 minutes, but after an hour or so you do notice. And this brings me directly to my next point, comfort, because weight alone is actually not the most deciding factor here, rather how it's distributed. So this portion here, let's call it a neckband, varies greatly from model to model. So here you can see this is a wide bit of plastic, but you have others where this is just a flexible band. So how does this influence comfort? Personally speaking, I enjoyed this YK set hands-free neck light, that's how it's called, the most. So first of all, this here is freely adjustable. Then the whole length is padded, but it's also flat. So if you wrap it around your neck, it's almost like a neck charmer, and this means the whole weight is actually distributed evenly around your whole neck. So compared to this one here, where you have this huge like stiff portion, it kind of sits on top of your neck and actually doesn't feel very comfortable, because your neck actually doesn't have this exact shape. I mean, we all are slightly different, so your neck actually doesn't have this exact shape. So you will notice how the neck light is kind of sitting on this one point, kind of like a brick. Whereas here, when the neckband is very flexible and flat, you have like something that really charms your neck. So also, for example, this deep bone Neura neck, it's also fully flexible, which is nice. But if you look closely at this, this is round. And if you have a round object against a flat surface, so your back of your neck, this means the full weight rests on this one contact point, whereas if it's flat, the weight is distributed more evenly. So on paper, this is just as nice, but because this neckline here has a flat surface, it feels more comfortable. All these necklights here, like the Glock-Crescent, this is the Glock-Crescent, this was Adoric, and this is here this Faibu lamp with these big portions here that are stiff. To me personally, they don't feel very comfortable, and the wider this portion is, you can maybe see the difference here, the wider this portion is, the more uncomfortable it felt. And then we have necklights like this one here or this one here. They have this stiff portion here, but then they also have a padding here. But they kind of glue the padding on top of it. So especially here with this necklight, you can really see how they kind of glued it on top of that. So you have this stiff portion, but then you have an even smaller padding. Possibly this is supposed to prevent the necklight from sliding around, but what it actually does, in my experience, it just kind of makes it sit like even higher on your neck. It just doesn't feel very comfortable. Now there are three things I also want to address. So this Grettin necklight, it does have this stiff portion, but it's rounder. I don't know how well you can see this. So here, this is flatter and this is rounder, and to me personally, that felt a little bit more comfortable. And also the padding, it's actually set into the neckband, this stiff portion, so it doesn't sit as much on top. So I felt this actually felt rather comfortable. And also these here, they have this, it's not very flexible, but it's flat. So if you put it around your neck, I actually felt this is rather comfortable long term, despite, it doesn't look that nice, but you have to understand, if you see this isn't actual padding. I suppose this was added to prevent the thing from slipping around. Not that it helps, but it isn't actually padding as you think it is. So these bare neck lights here, where there's just this like plastic band, actually don't feel all that uncomfortable. So to sum it up, if you ask me, these kind of neck bands that are wide and stiff, so Glock-Crescent, Adoric, this was the Faibu lamp, they are kind of a miss for me personally. Now, it's not only about comfort, but also flexibility. For example, this Osram light here, you can only change the direction here vertically, but not horizontally. So, and this neckline is so stiff. I mean, there's some band inside there, but you can't really manipulate it. So what happens is, when you put this on, the lights are actually like more like going outside, but you need to cross, and you can't really focus it on your knitting. So personally speaking, I couldn't make it work for knitting. I mean, if you're sitting underneath the car or so, maybe it doesn't matter, but for knitting, I would actually say this was a little bit of a fail. Now compare that, and where is it? Compare this to this necklight here. Looks very similar, but here you have a little portion that is actually adjustable, so it sits better around your neck, and then these bits here can be adjusted freely. So this actually, I felt, was rather nice and comfortable, and you could adjust it. But all other lights I tested were basically the same. You can really adjust things freely and it stays put, with the possible only exception here, this Luxjet light. I don't know what they did here, but it's so flimsy, so when I put it on around my neck, it just didn't stay put. And then, I tried to manipulate it, but then it kind of springs back, and you can really, you can tell the difference. Here, this stays put, and this it just didn't feel right, sorry. Now, flexibility probably matters most when it comes to people with big busts, because a big portion of your neckband will rest on top of your bust. So that's the issue with all of these necklights. There is this huge stiff portion where you can't change anything, so everything rests on top of your bust. So this means the light shines in this direction. You're knitting here below. The light never reaches your knitting. And then I've received quite a couple of comments from people who said, okay, I just can't make necklights work. And to this I would say, if you take a look at this necklight or this necklight here, you can see this here is stiff, this here is stiff, everything's stiff, and only this short little portion is where you can manipulate things. And if you have a big bust, it probably won't, you probably won't be able to make this work. So everything that is very long and flexible should work. I mean, someone suggested I should use oranges or cabbages to simulate things. Now, I'm not gonna do this because I think it's kind of offensive, but everything that is very flexible, like this necklight here, I suspect you can kind of make this work. And this is possibly the reason why I also like this gritting necklight and I ranked it so high, because you have a very long flexible portion here with a rather short, well, stiff portion. And here too, you possibly can make it work. I mean, it will depend on the size of your bust, your sitting position, things like that. That is something I am hesitant to comment on because there's a lot of different body configurations. But if that is your problem, I would look for necklights that are flexible, and this gritting necklight here is very, very nice in this regard. And well, possibly here this eco necklight, I mean, I said it was very, 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 not very light, but the flexible portion here is very, very long, and also the arms are very long, so you can tell if these compare side by side here. So this is the Osram light. So if you have big bust, this is possibly the worst necklight for you. But if you compare the length of these necklights, you can see that there is quite a big difference. So that's 5 centimeters, 2 inches or so of a difference. And that is something I would be on the lookout for. Now, if everything fails, there are also headlamps. I thought that this would go smoother, but whatever. There are also headlamps. And this, I mean, this is kind of beyond the scope of this video, but I will say that also very chic, very fashionable, don't you think? All these necklights are basically cheap trinkets. They sell for 20, 25 US dollars, but the production costs are basically, well, probably more like 1 or so. Let's not think about that. However, when it comes to headlamps, you can find headlamps for as much as 100, 200, 300 US dollars or so. Because there are hikers, or I don't know, some mad scientists who explore caves or something like that, unexplored caves, things like that. And they need some really, really strong light here. So these headlamps typically come with better batteries. Some of them, not all of them, they're cheap headlamps as well, but some of them have a lot of power. So if you are looking for something that works for you and you have big busts, headlamps might be an option. Of course, you need to be comfortable with wearing a headband while knitting. I personally possibly wouldn't want that, but some maybe don't mind. And of course, if you want sheer light intensity, then you will find it, of course, at a price, but you will find a lot more options in the headlamp department. But of course, this goes beyond the video. This is one I bought here for by a brand called Petzl. They actually do produce really, really nice headlamps, so I'm using this for hiking, stuff like that. But you could possibly use it for knitting if you have the problem with the big busts. Or what a lot of people also said, their neckline wouldn't stay put. Of course, I said, okay, the more flexible it is, the better it is. But if you still can't make it work, use a headlamp, because this typically stays put. In the last step, I also fully charged all necklights, turned them on and on the brightest setting, and then checked how long they lasted. And this competition was won by this Adoric light, which lasted by far the longest with 13 hours on the brightest setting. And I guess this explains why this middle piece here is so wide, but 30 hours is really, really impressive. Then this here Griffin light and the LuxJet light, they also lasted 7.5 hours, which was the second longest. My Glocucent light here, this only still reasonable, only lasted 6 hours here on the very low end of my comparison. And here this Osram light only lasted 4 hours. However, I mean, this has some serious output, so I think 4 hours is still very reasonable. Your biggest problem will be that most of these necklights actually use dead cheap batteries. I mean, they cost $20 US, but the production cost is probably closer to $1 or $2. So this is basically cheap crap, and the batteries will diminish, their charge will diminish very, very quickly. Now, I have no way to test this in a significant way, so I'm not gonna comment on it. Now, I will say, this Stier necklight, the very bright one. So this is the only necklight here that comes with separate batteries here. So they're separate batteries. In a way, this makes things a little, I mean, if you buy it, they come with batteries, but in a way, this makes it a little bit more complicated. All other necklights here have USB Type-C sockets, so I think this one here still has mini. Yeah, this still has mini USB, but all others have USB Type-C sockets. So you can just plug them into your mobile charger, whatever. You have a house, you probably have some chargers in your house anyway, you can just plug them in. Here you have separate batteries, but this has the added benefit, or I imagine this could be an added benefit. So after a year or so, when the batteries here are, well, dead, basically, and only last half an hour or so, here you can just exchange the batteries and, you know, charge the new ones, and you will have a new product. So that is something I might mention. Other than that, all these batteries last longer than 5 hours, and your typical knitting session isn't 5 hours, but hopefully, because you are making breaks, closer to 1 or even a little bit less. And of course, you only need the necklight at night when it's dark. So 5 hours, 5, 6, 7 hours is actually plenty for 1, 2, or even 3 knitting sessions, at least in my experience. So in my experience, when it comes to battery life, you will have no problems with either of these products. However, long term is another thing. So I really wouldn't expect these batteries to last a lifetime. Now this brings me directly to my next point, durability. All of these necklines look kind of cheap. I mean, this one here is possibly the only one that looked a little bit nicer. And I will say that the Osram light is the only one that comes with little rubber pieces that go onto the sockets, because, you know, obviously you put your necklight into your knitting bag and there's a lot of lint, whatever in there. So these can get dirty, and when they're too dirty, they might stop working. And so I will say that these two look a little bit more refined, but you know, other than that, I mean, I can't really test these long term in a significant way. I mean, I've knitted with each of them for an hour or two, one knitting session like that, but other than that, I really can't tell. But again, speaking from experience, you shouldn't expect them to last a lifetime. My last neck light lasted 3 years. And the one before maybe 2. So that is round about what you can expect in my experience. And I would be hard pressed to find a significant difference where I could say, okay, this really looks a little bit more refined. You know, not really. And this already brings me to my last point, price. And there's actually very little to say about it because all these necklights are around about the same price. Interestingly enough, so they range between 15 and 25 euros here in Europe. While in the US, the price range is typically, well, below $20 US. So they are quite a bit cheaper in the US. So I don't know why, but it is what it is. I will say, so this Glockrescent necklight is currently sold for 25 euros here in Europe and around $21 US in the US. It's actually one of the most expensive ones, well, if you want to call it expensive, but other than the 6 settings, I actually can't really see why it should be more expensive. It feels like same or worse than some of the competitors. These necklights here, they are typically a little bit more expensive, so around about $30 US or 30 euros, sometimes even a little bit more. Now, the light intensity of these lights is dramatically higher, so I feel that higher price is warranted, at least if you are looking for light intensity. Of course, the batteries and the more powerful LEDs, they need to come from somewhere. So, but other than that, I think price is really nothing we can talk about here. Now, which of these necklights will I keep and which is actually the best? So here's what I did. I gave each of these necklights marks from 1 to 5 in each of the different categories we've been talking about, and then I summed things up. And the grid-in here was the clear winner with the YK set here as a close second, and then in the third place for me personally was this necklight here with the white bit. This Eco light was the overall worst, while the Lux Jet light and this Adoric light here ranked second to last. Now here's the thing, obviously I sat down and knitted a bit with each light. I knitted for an hour and then I exchanged lights, and every 50 minutes I took notes, and then after a couple of breaks I used the winner to knit one full knitting session. And I do have to say that for my personal needs I would actually say that either this Stier or the YK set, those are the ones that I will possibly knit the most. This one here, because it is just so bright, and I like black yarn and darker yarns and more complicated stitches, and then the brightness matters. And this here, for me personally, comfort is actually the most deciding factor. So overall, I said this one here is the winner, but it's not as comfortable as this one. And for me, for easier patterns, comfort is the deciding factor. And, you know, flat bands just seem to work better for me. Perhaps the most important takeaway from this video is, well, it's my hope that by going through the various different steps one by one, you will be in a position to make your very own decision, because it can be very tricky to navigate around the bloated marketing text, AI generated pictures and fake reviews and so much on you can see on Amazon. And so I'm sure you are now in a position to pick out the characteristics that matter most to you. So even the brightness, it should be listed in lumen if you scroll down to the technical details, and then you can compare. I mean, these values might not be 100% correct, but they will give you a good inkling. Do you need brightness most of all because maybe you have bad eyesight or you really like to work with black yarn? Then check the lumen value in the description. Is it comfort? Then compare weights and then check how flexible these neckbands are and how flat. I mean, you are only seeing pictures, but just by comparing these two necklines, you can instantly see that the flexible part is longer, so they are bound to be more flexible. At the end of the day, all of these necklines will do their job. So even though I ranked these two necklines at the very low end, I could give these to people at my local knitting meetup and they would still be grateful and use them. So in fact, you might be watching, owning one of the necklines, going like, hey, it works for me. So if price is a consideration, I would actually pick the cheapest with the highest lumen value. Then again, I actually ranked this Gritton neckline at the highest, and it's actually among the cheapest. Now again, you will find the links to all of these products in the description below, but it's a little bit, well, difficult because the names are not the same in all countries. So again, this here is sold as Luxjet in Austria, but in the US it's Vecchia. Here, I already said the exact same product in a different color is sold as Esred or Cut in the US. And here the company, this actually doesn't even really have a name and there's no brand name on top of it, but the company that is set to sell this is called Faibui here in Austria, while the company in the US is Eastpin. So it's all very confusing, and I hope you do not let yourself be confused or distracted by the endless games of these manufacturers play to beat the ranking on Amazon. So what they do is they will offer the same product in different colors, so they appear twice in the search results, and then sometimes they also have two companies, so they appear 4 times, and then they will have a sponsored listing on top of that, so they appear a 5th time, and then they will change prices because constantly, and not all of these products will have the same price, and sometimes they have one product, it's the exact same product, hard product, but it has a different color and a slightly different shape, and they will charge $40 instead of $20 because some people will think, well, I don't know which one is the best, so I'm just gonna get the most expensive ones. It's all just games, and I do hope that this video kind of helped you to find the perfect neckline for you. If you still have any questions or comments, then use the comment section below this video, and as always, happy knitting and enjoy the rest of your day.